Alright, so in the last video, we have actually wired up the animations to create our player character and place it in the world, which is nice and dandy, but it's just sort of standing there. So let's actually make sure in this video that we can possess the character and move it around. First thing first, we need to make sure that whenever we hit the play button, the character is actually possessed itself and not just this random camera floating around. So I'm going to press escape. And I'm going to navigate back into my Knight blueprint. So in the content folder, blueprints, Knight, BP Knight. First, I want to select the BP Knight component itself and add a new spring arm, which is going to hold the camera. We can leave the naming as spring arm. I'm going to click on the spring arm to select it and add a new camera. Now, if I zoom out a little bit, you can see that there is a camera, however, it's facing the wrong direction. So while the spring arm component is selected, you can press the rotation arrow up here or press the E key and just rotate the camera to the front like this. Now, if you go to the right hand menu and go to the transform section, you can see that, we're getting some weird decimals. So you can literally just override this to -90. Next, we probably want to increase the distance a little bit. So again, if we click the spring arm and go to the camera section, target arm length property, we can put this to something like 450. You can really play around with this to just set it however you would like. I think this is probably the setting that I'm going to go with myself. So I can save and compile, go back to our level. But still, this doesn't mean that if we press play, nothing really changed. But you can see that there is now a camera available in our scene, in our game. And this is actually the preview of what you're going to get once we're going to possess the character itself. To possess our character, we need to create something that's called a game mode. So again, I want you to navigate to the blueprints section in our content drawer. And you can use the default blueprints folder, add blueprint class, game mode base. We're going to call it GM platformer. And in here, when we open the GM platformer, you can close the viewport and you can close the construction and the event graph as well, because we will only be working with the details panel over here. All you need to change is the default pawn class, which here we're going to change from default pawn to BP Knight. You can then save, compile. But here we still need to go to Edit, Project Settings, Maps and Modes. And here we will have the default game mode. And here we need to change it to the game mode that we have just created, which in our case is called GM_platformer. Now, if you close this and go back to our level, press play, you can see that we're finally possessing our knight, our player character knight. However, if I press buttons, A, D, left, right, spacebar, nothing really happens because we haven't wired up controls and navigation. So I'm going to press escape to get out of here. And we're going to head back to our content drawer, where in the main content folder, I'm going to add a new one, new folder called input. And in here, we're going to add a new called actions. I'm going to open actions. And here we're going to add, but this time not blueprint class, but input. And we're going to do input action. I'm going to call it IA_run. We're going to open it. And the only thing that I want you to change here is the digital Boolean to axis1D float. I'm going to explain in a little bit what it does, but you can feel free to close this. And back in our content folder, I want you to go to the input folder. And here we're going to go and add again input and input mapping context. We're going to call it IMC_platformer. We're going to open it. And here we're going to map keys to different actions. So in the default key mappings, in the mappings section, I'm going to add a new element. And from the menu over here where it says none, I'm going to select our only currently implemented action, which is called IA run. again, we're going to expand it further. And here we can define the keys that are going to be used to trigger the running action. I'm just going to press the keyboard over here and press the key D, which is going to pre-fill the D over here. So our first trigger for this action is going to be D, but that's going to be used to run to the right. And then we're going to add one more. Again, I'm going to press the keyboard button, press A this time, and that's going to be used to run to the left. However, we need to change one more thing. Once we wire things up, whenever we press D, this is going to start firing a certain signal. But whenever we press A, we want to revert, or in other words, negate this signal, because we want the character to run in the opposite direction. So if I expand this A key over here and go to modifiers, add a new modifier, and just select from the menu one that is called negate, and just leave it as is. You can save and get out of here. But in a nutshell, whenever we press D, it's going to start sending one signal. Whenever we press A, it's going to start sending the reverted signal. Now in our blueprint, we're going to go to the event graph, and here we're going to wire up all the actions and what we want the behavior to be once the user starts pressing buttons. All right, so the first thing that we need to do is to register the input mapping context that we have just created. This is a little bit of a broader topic that I'm definitely not going to get into for this video or this video series. It's something that you might want to just follow whatever I do on screen right now, and then as you get better or further along your Unreal Engine learning journey, this is going to become more relevant and you can dig deeper into it. So the first thing is that I'm going to get controller. And we want to trigger this as soon as the play begins, so we're going to be using the event begin play trigger node. From here, we're going to cast to player controller. And as player controller, we're going to get enhanced input local player subsystem. And we're going to do add mapping context. I'm going to connect the execution line over here. And here we have to select the mapping context that we want to add, which is the IMC platformer that we have just created. So this is the whole blueprint. Feel free to just copy it over. Once you're done, we will have access to the input actions that we've created. Currently, we only have the IA run, which is going to give us this nice trigger node. Here we're interested in the triggered pin, which means as long as the player is holding the particular button that we have this wired up to, we're going to keep firing the action. The action being add movement input. We're going to be moving along the x-axis. So here I'm just gonna type in 1. I'm going to leave everything else to 0. And we need to connect the action value to the scale value. If you remember, we wired up D to be firing the positive value, and then we negated A, so A is firing the negative value. So essentially, D is moving us to the positive direction of the x-axis, A is moving us to the negative direction on the x-axis. And this is all you need to have to actually save and compile. Go back to our level. And in the meantime, I have deleted the placeholder character that we have over here, because now we're going to be using this player start that we have been provided with by the default level. One thing that you need to make sure is that the capsule is actually correctly rotated. So if you press E, if you select the capsule and press E, you can rotate this blue arrow, which is essentially showing the front of our character, so that it aligns with the x-axis, which is the red arrow. Because sometimes by default it can be like the other way around, etc. In which case, if I press play now, it's going to start running. I'm pressing D and it's running to the left, which obviously is incorrect. But it's an easy fix. As I just mentioned, you just need to check in which direction the positive red arrow is pointing, and then you just rotate the blue arrow to align with that. Now when I press D, it runs to the right, and if I press A, it runs to the left, which is perfect. Now let's use the same principle that we've just learned and implement the jumping action. So I'm going to go to my content drawer, into actions. I'm going to create a new action by pressing add, input, input action, IA underscore jump. And here you can leave it, you don't even need to enter this, but I'm just gonna see what's different. If you open it, you can leave the value type. You know that for running we changed it to axis 1D, but here you can leave it to digital, because for jumping action, you know, the key is either pressed or not, which is the Boolean. We don't really care by how much it is pressed, so you can leave it at the default digital Boolean. In the IMC, input mapping context, I want you to add a new mapping. So next to mappings, press the plus button and select IA jump from the menu. Now expand the menu, and here I want to wire this up to the W key. So again, I'm going to press this button, press the W key. You can really wire this up to literally anything as long as it doesn't clash with the other inputs. And I'm going to do Control S to save. Now back in the blueprint, we already have the IMC wired up, so we don't have to do that again. I'm gonna just collapse this to get more space, and I'm gonna type in IA. I'm gonna right click and type in IA jump. We get this trigger node for the enhance input node IA jump. Here, however, we want to use the started pin, which only fires this action once as soon as the button is pressed. And here I'm gonna just type in jump and collapse this back. And this is literally all we need to do to implement jumping. So now we can save, compile, and go back to our level, press play. We still have the running functionality. And now if I press W, we also have the jumping functionality. All right, that's really cool, because we now have something that is slowly starting to resemble a little bit of a gameplay over here. But of course, as you probably notice, we still have only the idle animation playing, even if we jump, even if we sort of run to either direction, you know, the character is not really facing the right direction. So we're gonna fix all of this in the next video. I'll see you there.